There's no denying that Hyperia is a big deal. It's the tallest and fastest roller coaster ever built in the UK, and also the tallest and fastest roller coaster ever made by manufacturer Mack Rides. Thorpe Park has invested £18 million in this new attraction, so I'm sure they want to see a return on that investment. Money alone can't make a great roller coaster though, so does Hyperia live up to the hype built around it, and how does this new ride compare to others? Let's find out. I'm Rollercoaster David, and this is my review of Hyperia at Thorpe Park. Let's start off with a look at the ride's layout. Hyperia exits the station and turns to the right as the track tilts to the left in the first of several outer banked elements. This section is similar to the start of Untamed, and it's a fun way to kick things off, knowing that this ride will be unlike anything else in the UK. You then start to climb the 236 foot tall lift hill, which gains it the record of being the tallest roller coaster in the UK, beating the big one at Blackpool by about 23 feet. This height also gives it the energy to take the record for the fastest roller coaster in the UK, as it reaches a top speed of 81 miles per hour. Music is played all the way up the lift hill, which helps to build up the tension as you gain height. You also get an impressive view over the nearby small lakes and the rest of the surrounding area. Once Hyperia reaches the top of the lift hill, the ride breaks down, and riders are stranded for up to an hour before the problem can be fixed. As such, the ride remains shut for the rest of the day. The next day it reopens triumphantly, and this time at the top of the lift you dive down a 90-degree vertical drop that twists to the left 180 degrees. You then pull up into an Immelmann inversion that delivers some strong airtime during the exit, before you pull up into a unique element that it doesn't have enough energy to complete, so the ride valleys and closes down again for several days, after which it's down to one train operation. Once it reopens, this time it makes it through this element, which combines an outer banked airtime hill with a barrel roll down drop, before the track twists slightly from right to left and you pull up into a huge 0G stall. At the end of this stall, you continue down into a dive loop that runs into a splashdown. Next is an outward banked airtime hill that turns to the right, before that turn continues into a final straight airtime hill and you hit the brakes. Okay, so there's no denying this coaster has had more than its fair share of teething troubles and mechanical issues, but when it's working properly, what's it actually like to ride? Thankfully, over the course of a day and a half, I was able to fit in 7 or so rides, and let me say this, Hyperia is a great coaster. It's not without faults by any means, which I'll get to later, but in general, I was very happy with the rides that I got. I was lucky enough to have my very first ride in the front row, which offered great views and a wonderful speed sensation, but it wasn't the most extreme of rides, as forces were lessened a bit towards the front of the train, and the ride was still warming up. Overall, it was a fun and quite floaty ride. My second ride was in the back row, however, and that was when I really got to experience everything Hyperia has to offer. The first drop in the back is quite simply incredible, and maybe one of the best first drops on any coaster out there. The 90-degree drop combined with a full-length train means that as you go over the top in the back, you're absolutely yeeted out of your seat with extreme ejector airtime all the way to the bottom. Before riding and after experiencing another Mack hypercoaster, I had concerns that the twist in this drop might kill off some of the airtime, but thankfully this is in no way the case, and the airtime you get in the drop is quite simply incredible. The back row is really where it's best, but even on other rows further forward and in the front there's still plenty of ejector airtime to enjoy. After the drop, the pull-out and Immelmann turnaround provides some good sustained positive G that can give you a little bit of grey out if you're a bit dehydrated, and this lasts all the way until you start to descend and it transitions to more lovely ejector air. The squeeze from the positive G into the release of airtime is a great moment, and the ride quickly builds up speed as you drop down. Thorpe Park calls this next element simply an outer banked airtime hill, but that really doesn't do it justice. This element is unique in the world and combines this outer banked airtime hill with a kind of barrel roll down drop, and I think it deserves a proper name. With other coasters featuring silly names for elements like a dog tongue, banana roll or Norwegian loop, I think we should give this a particularly British name, thus I've christened it the sausage roll, for reasons that should be obvious if you live within the British Isles. The sausage roll is an amazing element that starts out very much like the outer banked airtime hill you get on Conda or even Steel Vengeance, and delivers some strong, great ejector air. But then it just keeps going and you flip upside down, all the while experiencing that amazing ejector air. There's even a bit of a head chopper effect as you return to the ground and fly past the ride's support structure. This really is Hyperia's signature element and it feels incredible to ride. The combination of airtime, height and going upside down through an inversion is truly amazing, and I wouldn't be too surprised if this element is copied by other coasters in the future. The next element is nearly as impressive as well, as it's an absolutely massive zero-G stall that feels like it goes on forever before you dive down vertically into a half loop. The design here is perfect and gives sustained weightless floater air all the way until you're dropping back down. If you've ever seen one of my videos before, you'll know that I sometimes find zero-G stalls can be a bit hit and miss, particularly ones by Intamin tend to have this unusual side-to-side shake to them, and only the ones by RMC seem to be absolutely perfect. But after riding Hyperion, I can confidently say that Mack have also cracked the zero-G stall code, and this one is super smooth as you float upside down for a ridiculously long time. It's just as good, if not better, than the same element on RMC coasters. After the half loop, however, the ride doesn't quite sustain those previous highs. There is a very noticeable trim that you go through during the splashdown element that slows the train down, and after that it's an outer-banked airtime hill which does give some nice airtime before the ride's finale. Unfortunately though, that finale is a bit of a letdown. The final airtime hill in particular is a bit of a missed opportunity. In the back row, the train actually seems to hit the final brake run before it crests the hill, so any potential airtime is instantly killed off. It's only slightly better in seats further forward, and I kinda feel like this ride should have ended on something big with a bang, but instead it ends on a bit of a whimper. The ending doesn't detract from how amazing the preceding elements are though, and that's the other thing about Hyperia, it's just over far too quickly. I had concerns before it opened about the length of this coaster given its size, and yeah, those concerns never went away. The first half of Hyperia is legitimately incredible, but it's just a shame that they seem to have forgotten to build the second half and rushed it all towards the end. It's almost like they built the ride up to the zero-G stall and dive loop and then ran out of budget, so they clicked autocomplete to bring the ride home as quickly and inexpensively as possible. Comparing it to other hypercoasters, one that I think is kind of short is Skyrush, but even that is about 350 feet longer than Hyperia, and Hyperia is significantly taller and faster. Likewise, Zadra, another coaster that I think can feel a little short, is over 1,000 feet longer than Hyperia. In that way, I almost feel like Hyperia is better compared to a coaster like Oblivion or Stealth or even King Dakar, which are very much one or two trick ponies that are over rather quickly, but definitely deliver the goods during the short amount of track with which they're built. I may sound like I'm being quite negative about Hyperia, but don't get me wrong, it's still a great ride, and in spite of its lack of length, Hyperia is an incredible coaster, and in that respect it's a wonderful addition to Great Britain's and even Europe's lineup of coasters. The combination of height, speed, airtime and inversions mean that it's honestly unlike any other coaster that currently exists. It's really quite a unique layout. It may be a Mack coaster, but it seems clear to me that the elements on Hyperia are much more modern and more akin to those you tend to find on RMC coasters. In previous years, it seems Mack have generally played it fairly safe with their coasters. Blue Fire is a great ride, but it's a bit sedate when compared to Intamin launchers, and likewise the first hypercoaster design is a very standard out and back layout with a couple of standard inversions thrown in, and whilst coasters like Alpina Blitz or Manta are great fun in their own right, they aren't exactly pushing the limits of design possibilities. In more recent years however, I think Mack are starting to get a bit more creative and push the envelope a bit. The Ride to Happiness was a much more impressive ride than I expected, and that's the case with Hyperia too. The design really is focused on big elements with airtime and inversions, and it feels like you're upside down or out of your seat for most of the ride. This was demonstrated nicely on the day that I visited, when they sent out a test train with water dummies that had the lids open, so you could see the contents were sprayed all over the place during moments of airtime. The UK already has some great coasters like Nemesis, Megaphobia and Stealth, but I think that Hyperia now takes the crown as our country's best coaster, and it goes a bit further to place us back on the world rollercoaster map with a genuinely unique and awesome ride. The theming for Hyperia is a bit strange in my eyes. The marketing team have created a story of a goddess forging her wings of gold to take to the skies and escape an island because she's afraid of water or something. But in all honesty, it seems kind of unnecessary and a bit out of place. This is the tallest and fastest roller coaster ever built in the UK, and the first to break the height record in over 2 decades. That alone should be enough to sell this ride to the general public, without the need for some mythical goddess making her first steps in the aviation industry. The execution of the theme also leaves something to be desired as well. When the train leaves the station, a pair of golden wings are forged with a projection mapping trick on the exit wall. However, for some reason the clips holding the wings are also highlighted in gold, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Likewise, the colour scheme isn't that appealing to my eyes. The gold colour chosen for the lower part of the supports is a bit on the browny yellow side and doesn't really shine like gold should. I also think this coaster could do with some more effort put into the landscaping work to make it look a lot nicer. I know in the original plans there included a plaza near the splashdown to watch the ride, but sadly this was scrapped and we're left with this rather murky algae-filled pond behind a tall fence, and a concrete surrounded splashdown that really just sort of sticks out like a sore thumb. Hopefully the park will put a bit of effort to clean up the area and make it look a bit nicer, especially once some bushes and grass and trees grow in, but it's a shame that the ride isn't presented in a better way during opening season. Another thing I dislike is the ride's slogan, "Find Your Fearless." Even as I'm writing this review, the basic grammar checker knows that there's something wrong with it. Find Your Fearless almost sounds like a badly translated English slogan from a park somewhere in the Far East. Did they mean to put "Find Your Courage" or "Fearlessness" as the grammar check suggests? Or maybe they meant to put "Find out that you're fearless." Or maybe there's just a missing noun at the end. Find your fearless friend, or your fearless pants, or your fearless toaster. Find Your Fearless on its own just doesn't make any grammatical sense. Hyperia also has its own soundtrack, which I would describe as generically epic, but I guess it fits the ride, and one nice touch that I do like is that the music is played as you go up the lift hill, and syncs up with the first drop, which is a great effect when you ride. Going back to some of the ride's technical characteristics, overall Hyperia was really smooth, particularly in the front, although strangely I had one ride which was surprisingly rough. I'm really not sure what went wrong here, whether it was something to do with the weight distribution of the train or some other factor, but I was in the 6th row and there was quite a rattle and shakes in all parts of the ride where there was positive G. My friend riding in the back of the train noticed this as well, so much so that his partner didn't want to ride again for the rest of that day. Every other ride I had, there was maybe a slight rattle or a little bit of roughness, but never anything to the same extent as that ride. It was really quite strange. Operations for the ride, when it was up and running, were generally very impressive and efficient, which kept the queue moving. The ride's got a separate single rider queue, and they were adding a single rider every time an odd number of people presented to the batcher. This meant that the single rider line usually moved quite well, although people seemed to cotton onto that quite quickly, so it filled up later on in the day. If you've been following this coaster closely, then you'll know that there have been some other issues with it, and reliability does seem to be a problem. Thorpe Park just can't seem to get this ride open consistently at present. After running for all of opening day, it closed for nearly 3 weeks, and after it reopened, a train got stuck in the lift hill and the ride closed down again. After I visited, it also valleyed during testing, and I believe it's now reopened, but it's only running one train. This is the tallest roller coaster Mack Rides have ever built, but not by a huge margin, so these technical problems are quite disappointing and surprising, and the park's received quite a bit of negative press regarding them. When it's running though, the ride experience is great. There's nothing like it in the UK that delivers the sustained inversions and airtime that this does. For the average UK park goer who's probably only ever been to Thorpe Park, Chessington and Alton Towers, Hyperia will probably be mind-blowing and could encourage more people to join us in this crazy hobby of ours. This really is a next level coaster that'll be tough for any ride in the UK to beat, and it stacks up favourably to a lot of the world's top coasters. Just how favourably though? How does it compare to other coasters around the world? Well, one obvious coaster to compare it to would be the other Mack Hypercoaster I rode at Land of Legends earlier this year. The big elements of Hyperia beat this coaster easily, but then there's the length factor which complicates things. You get nearly an extra 1,000 feet of track on the ride in Turkey, which does make it feel like a more complete ride. There's something really quite incredible about the sheer wow factor of Hyperia's big elements that might make me rank it higher than a lot of other coasters, but the length issue is a factor I just can't ignore either. I actually think a good coaster to compare Hyperia to is Zadra. Both coasters have a unique turnaround, an awesome zero-G stall, and some funky inversions, and both feel a bit on the short side when you hit the ride's brakes. It's quite a close call for me, but I think Zadra would still be the winner if I was forced to choose. Conda is another coaster that I think would be an interesting one to compare, as the start of the outer banked airtime hill is very similar to the aforementioned sausage roll on Hyperia. Despite being nearly 75 feet shorter than Hyperia, I think again I would just have to give Conda the edge, as the ride just has so many more elements, even if Hyperia has a bigger size and more of a wow factor. If you're a member of this channel, you'll probably have seen my top 25 coasters video, and might be wondering if or where Hyperia would appear in that list. I think it would just squeeze in, probably below X2, although I wouldn't want to remove the flying dinosaur from my list as it's so different from everything else. It's always a problem when coming up with such a list, is that there's so many worthy coasters, but only 25 slots to fit them in. So overall, Hyperia has the wow factor and genuinely is a breathtaking coaster. Maybe one day they'll modify it and build the ride with the second half that it deserves, but until then it may not be everything I'd hoped for as the UK's tallest coaster, but it delivers more than enough to ensure that this is now the top ride in the UK, a truly world-class coaster, and one that you should make every effort to experience, assuming that it's eventually able to stay open more consistently. If you've enjoyed this video, then please click on the like button and consider subscribing and making a comment, as I'd love for this channel to grow a bit larger, but the YouTube algorithm is still a bit of a mystery to me. I've been Rollercoaster David, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again in another video very soon.